The day my mother signed legal documents listing Kayla as her only daughter, she forgot one critical thing. I was the one who taught her how to read a contract. I remember sitting in my car outside the attorney's office. I hadn't been invited inside, of course, watching my mother walk out with Gerald, both of them looking lighter somehow, the way people look when they've completed something they'd been putting off. She didn't see me. I had parked across the street, not to spy, not to confront, but because a paralegal friend had tipped me off that the appointment was happening and something in me needed to witness it with my own eyes before I could fully believe it. She was smiling. My mother was smiling on the day she signed me out of her life. And I sat in that car and I watched her get into Gerald's truck, and I made a decision so quietly it barely felt like a decision at all. No anger, no tears, just a thought, clear and cold and completely formed. If she had made her choice that carefully, then I was going to make mine just as carefully. I just wasn't going to tell anyone I was making it. But to understand why that moment destroyed me as much as it freed me, you need to understand who my mother was before Gerald. Before Kayla. Before the family I grew up in became something I no longer recognized. My mother's name is Renee Marie Collier, and for the first 23 years of my life, she was the most constant thing I had. My father left when I was 4, not dramatically, not with a fight I can remember, just gradually, and then completely, the way some men exit a story they've decided isn't theirs. My mother raised me alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio, working as an office manager during the day and doing bookkeeping for small businesses at night, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a cup of coffee that had gone cold and never complaining about it once. She was tough in the way that women who have been left have to be tough. Not hard, not cold, but load-bearing. Like a wall that knows it's holding the roof up and has stopped thinking about anything else. She went to every school event. She drove me to piano lessons for 3 years, even though I never got particularly good at it because she said the trying was the point. She stood outside in the rain at my high school graduation because the bleachers were full and she didn't want to miss my name being called. I loved her the way you love someone who has been your entire world. Completely and without audit. The way children love before they understand that love can be conditional and withdrawn and redirected to someone younger and easier and less complicated. I was 23 when she met Gerald Whitmore. I was out of the apartment by then, working my first paralegal job, living in a studio 30 minutes away, calling her every Sunday the way we had always done. She met him at a neighborhood fundraiser, the kind of event my mother attended because she had always believed in showing up for the community the way she had always believed in showing up for everything. Gerald was 51, recently widowed, contractor, broad hands, easy smile, the kind of man who makes a room feel organized just by standing in it. He had a daughter, Kayla, 16 years old, quiet, grieving her mother who had passed from ovarian cancer 8 months earlier. I met Kayla 4 months into my mother and Gerald's relationship at a Sunday dinner my mother hosted with what I now recognize was strategic optimism. She arranged the table settings like she was directing a play, put flowers in the center, made the pot roast my grandmother had taught her. She wanted it to go well. I could feel how much she wanted it to go well, and because I loved her, I wanted it to go well too. Kayla was polite and watchful and clearly still in the middle of grief. The specific grief of a teenager who has lost her mother and doesn't yet have language for the size of it. I felt for her. I made an effort. I asked her about school, listened to her answers, suggested a book I thought she might like. She looked at me with her father's eyes, measuring, careful, and said thank you in a way that meant she wasn't sure yet if she meant it. I didn't blame her. I had all the patience in the world for her that night. I had all the patience in the world for the next year and a half, actually. Through my mother and Gerald's engagement, through the wedding planning, through the integration of our 2 separate family histories into something that was supposed to function as one. I was the supportive adult daughter. I gave the toast at the rehearsal dinner. I danced with Gerald at the reception and welcomed him genuinely and meant it. But I want to tell you about the first moment something felt wrong. because there was a first moment and I minimized it, and I think about that minimization more than I think about almost anything else in this story. It was 6 weeks after the wedding. My mother called me on a Tuesday, not our usual Sunday, a Tuesday, and she was excited, the specific bright excitement in her voice that I had heard my whole life when she had something to share. She told me that Kayla had made the honor roll. First time since her mother died. The school counselor had called Gerald, and Gerald had told Renee, and she was so proud, Diane. So proud. I said that was wonderful. I asked how Kayla was feeling about it. I was genuinely glad that a grieving teenager had found her footing academically. What I noticed and set aside, and should not have set aside, was the quality of my mother's pride. It was not the pride of a stepmother supporting a struggling child. It was the pride of a mother. The specific fullness of it, the way it took up the whole phone call, the way she kept returning to it. I just can't tell you how proud I am. I can't even explain it. She had used those exact words about me many times over many years. The honor roll, the paralegal certification, the first apartment. But those calls had never had this quality. This overflow. This discovery. I thought, she's found something new to love. That's not a threat. That's just who she is. I was right that it was who she was. I was wrong that it wasn't a threat. The changes came the way structural changes always come, so gradually that each individual shift seems manageable, even reasonable, and you don't see the full picture until you step far enough back that the distance itself is part of the problem. The Sunday calls got shorter. Not all at once, a few minutes here, a few minutes there, the kind of shortening you attribute to a busy week rather than a pattern. But the content changed too. The calls that used to be about me, my job, my apartment, a person I was dating, a decision I was working through, became about the house. About Kayla's college search. About Gerald's business. About the new family's daily life, which I was adjacent to, but not inside. I was still invited to dinners. I still showed up. But the energy of those dinners had reorganized itself around a new center of gravity, and I was not it. I told myself this was natural. I told myself that a teenager in the house requires a different kind of active parenting than a 25-year-old daughter with her own life. I told myself I was being mature and generous, and that real love doesn't require constant demonstration. I told myself a lot of things that were individually true and collectively a way of not seeing what was actually happening. The thing that made it impossible to keep not seeing was social media. I know that sounds minor compared to everything else. But there is something about watching your replacement happen in public, in real time, with an audience, that removes the possibility of convincing yourself you're imagining it. My mother was not a heavy social media user before Gerald. She had an account, posted occasionally a holiday photo, a picture of a meal she was proud of, my graduation photo the year I finished my certification. Moderate, occasional, unremarkable. After Kayla moved in, she posted constantly. Kayla's first day at her new school. Kayla's homecoming dress. Kayla's acceptance letter. Not from her first choice school, but the caption read, "So proud of my girl," in capital letters that I could feel the weight of from 30 miles away. Mother-daughter spa day with a photo of both of them in robes, faces masked, laughing at something the camera didn't catch. The caption, "My daughter makes every day better." My daughter. Not my stepdaughter. Not Kayla. My daughter. I scrolled through these posts on a Saturday morning in my apartment, and I counted. In the 6 months since Kayla had moved in full-time for her senior year of high school, my mother had posted 41 photos featuring Kayla with captions identifying her as her daughter. In the same 6 months, she had posted one photo of me, a group shot from a cousin's birthday party where I was third from the left. I put my phone down. I made coffee. I stood at my kitchen window and looked at the parking lot below, and I let myself feel, fully and without management, what it felt like to watch my mother love someone else with the intensity she used to reserve for me. It felt like a specific kind of quiet, the quiet of a room where music used to play. And then I washed my coffee cup, got dressed, and went to work. Because I was my mother's daughter, and she had taught me that you keep going. But I was also paying attention in a different way now. Not hurt attention, careful attention. The attention of someone who has decided that the watching itself is information. What happened next changed everything. My mother called me on a Thursday night. Again, a Thursday, not Sunday, which should have told me something, and said she wanted to talk about family planning. I assumed she meant a vacation, or the holidays, or some logistical thing about Gerald's family joining for Thanksgiving. She meant estate planning. She told me she and Gerald had been to see an attorney, that they had updated their documents to reflect their family, that everything was being organized properly now, which she said with the tone of someone who has done a responsible adult thing and wants acknowledgement for it. I asked, carefully, what the updated documents reflected. She said Gerald's estate would go to Kayla, which made sense given that Kayla was his biological child. And her estate. She paused here, the specific pause of someone who has rehearsed a conversation and reached the part they rehearsed least. Her estate was being structured around the household. What does that mean, Mom? I said. The household. It means Gerald and Kayla are the primary. It means the assets are structured around the family unit, she said. Am I in the documents? I said. A pause that lasted 1 second too long. Diane, you have your own life. You're established. You have your career, your apartment. You don't need.
Mom, I said.
Am I in the documents? The pause that followed was its own answer.
I said, okay.
Thank you for telling me. She said, I hope you understand this isn't about. I understand, Mom, I said. I'll talk to you Sunday. I hung up. I sat very still for a long time. And then I did something I had never done before. I wrote my mother a letter. Not an email. A handwritten letter that I never sent, that I wrote in one sitting at my kitchen table and sealed in an envelope and put in my desk drawer where it still is. In the letter, I said everything. Everything I had been managing and minimizing and setting aside for 2 years. The phone calls. The social media. The dinners where I sat at a table organized around someone else. The pride she showed for Kayla that had the texture of something she used to show for me. The estate documents. The pause before she answered my question. I said, I know you love her. I know she needed you. I know you didn't decide to stop loving me. I just need you to understand that love that isn't shown is love that cannot be relied on. And I have to rely on myself now in the ways I once relied on you. Then I sealed the envelope, put it in the drawer, and I started making decisions. The first decision was financial. I went through every account, every document, every legal and administrative connection between my financial life and my mother's. There were more than I had realized. A joint savings account we had opened when I was in college, a beneficiary designation on an old life insurance policy my mother had taken out when I was a teenager, my name on the emergency contact and financial decision-maker designation for her primary bank account, a storage unit we technically co-leased that had some of my grandmother's furniture in it. I began removing my name from all of it, methodically, without urgency, without alerting anyone, account by account, document by document. I opened my own accounts, updated my own beneficiary designations, established my own financial structures with the clean, deliberate thoroughness of a paralegal who understands exactly what these documents mean. This took 4 months. I did it all myself on evenings and weekends, without telling anyone. My mother didn't notice, or if she noticed, she didn't ask. Gerald certainly didn't notice. Kayla was in college by then, 3 states away, becoming the person my mother called every single day. I know she called every single day because my mother told me so, with a specific warmth she used for things that made her happy. She called me twice a week by then. 15 minutes, sometimes 20. I kept showing up, kept coming to dinners, kept bringing wine and asking about Gerald's projects and listening to Kayla updates and smiling at the right moments. I was pleasant and present and gave no indication of the decisions I was making or the attention I was paying. But I was paying a great deal of attention. Specifically, I was paying attention to Gerald's business. Gerald owned Whitmore Construction, 20 years old, solid regional reputation, primarily residential and light commercial work. It was the financial backbone of my mother and Gerald's life. The house they lived in, the cars they drove, the retirement they were planning, all of it depended on Whitmore Construction continuing to generate what it had been generating. About 18 months into my mother's marriage, Gerald had taken on a business partner named Russell Crane. Russ, as he was universally called, had capital and connections and a specific talent for making conservative men feel like they were thinking too small. He had brought Whitmore into 2 commercial projects significantly larger than anything Gerald had done before. I had heard about Russ at dinners. Gerald talked about him with the specific enthusiasm of a man who has found someone who confirms his ambitions. My mother seemed to like him. He had come to the house for dinner twice. I had researched him quietly after the second dinner because researching people is what I do, and because something about his particular combination of confidence and vagueness made me want to know more than he was volunteering. What I found, in public records and court filings and business registration documents, none of which required anything beyond professional knowledge and a few hours of careful searching, was a pattern. Russ Crane had been involved in 4 business partnerships over the previous 12 years. 2 had ended in legal disputes. 1 had ended in a judgment against the business that the other partner had been left holding. Russ himself had walked away from each situation with his personal assets intact through a combination of strategic restructuring and careful timing. He was not a criminal. He was something more difficult to prosecute. A man who was very good at positioning himself to survive situations that destroyed the people beside him. I documented everything I found, organized it, dated it, and I said nothing. Not to my mother, not to Gerald. Because I had tried once to offer information about the business, a gentle comment at a dinner about the liability exposure in one of the commercial contracts, framed as professional curiosity, and Gerald had smiled and said he had good people handling it. My mother had touched my arm and said quietly, "Don't involve yourself in Gerald's business, honey. Don't involve yourself." Okay. I didn't involve myself. I also didn't protect them. And I've spent a long time deciding how I feel about that, and where I have landed is here. I was not their financial advisor. I was not their attorney. I was the daughter who had been removed from the estate plan, the woman who had been replaced on social media, the person who sat at their table and smiled while my mother raised a glass to her real daughter. I had tried, once, to offer what I knew. I had been told to stay out of it. I stayed out of it. But I watched. And I documented. And I waited. The Thanksgiving toast happened when I was 30.
I have told you what she said.
I have told you that I smiled and drank my wine, and that, across the table, something in me completed a decision that had been in progress for almost 2 years. What I have not told you is what happened 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, when I finally ran the numbers on what Russ Crane's commercial project liability exposure meant for Whitmore Construction's balance sheet. It was not good. The short version: one of the commercial projects had run significantly over budget and had produced a dispute with a general contractor that had escalated to legal action. The claim amount, based on the filing I pulled, was substantial. Gerald's general liability coverage, based on the certificate of insurance he had filed with the county for the project permit, public record, fell short of the claim by a margin that would require the company to cover the difference from operating capital or assets. The company's primary asset was the building that housed the shop. The building was mortgaged. The mortgage was, based on the county property records, cross-collateralized with the business line of credit. The house my mother lived in was also mortgaged. The mortgage was held by the same bank. I am a paralegal. I understand what cross-collateralization means when a judgment arrives. I wrote down a timeline, estimated dates, anticipated the sequence of events that would follow if the legal claim proceeded, and the judgment was what the filings suggested it would be. And then I looked at my own financial picture. My accounts, my designations, my name on 0 documents connected to anything in that house or that business. I was clean. They were not. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a story that's tidier than the truth. I felt something that was not triumph and not quite grief. It was the feeling of standing on solid ground and looking at a structure that is going to fall, and knowing you are no longer inside it. There is relief in that feeling. There is also something heavier than relief. Because the structure falling is your mother's house. And the woman inside it is still the woman who stood at the pool edge in her work clothes. I held both of those things. I am still holding both of them. The call came on a Wednesday evening in February. Gerald's voice, not my mother's. He called me directly, which had happened only twice before in our entire relationship. He was controlled, but barely. He told me there had been a judgment. He told me the amount. He told me he paused here. Russ had apparently restructured his involvement in the project in a way that had shifted the primary liability exposure to Whitmore Construction 6 months ago, and they were only now understanding the full implications. Russ had gotten out. Quietly, legally, months ago. Gerald was holding it alone. I need to ask you something, Gerald said. Your mother said you had raised a concern about the project liability at one of our dinners. I mentioned it once, I said. Briefly. How much did you know? He said. Enough, I said. I looked into Russ's background after I met him. I found a pattern. I mentioned it once, and was told to stay out of the business. A long silence. Why didn't you push harder? He said. I thought about how to answer that. I thought about the Thanksgiving toast, about 41 photos, about the estate documents, and the pause before my mother answered whether I was in them. I tried once, I said. Once was what I was allowed. He didn't say anything. Is my mother okay? I said. She's trying to understand what this means for the house, he said. His voice had changed on that last word. The house. The thing he had built and now understood he might not be able to hold. I'm sorry, Gerald, I said. And I meant it. Not fully. Not without the complicated weight of everything between us. But the part of me that was my mother's daughter, the part that had been raised to mean the things I said, meant it. My mother called an hour later. She had been crying and had stopped, and the specific flatness in her voice was the flatness of someone who has moved through shock and arrived at the gray country on the other side. Diane, she said. Mom. Gerald says you knew something about Russ. About the business. I knew his history, I said. I found public records. I said something once at dinner, and was asked not to involve myself. She was quiet for a moment. We might lose the house, she said. I know, I said. Is there anything? She stopped. Do you have anything, any connection to any of the accounts, anything that could help us? And here it was. The moment I had not engineered but had simply, patiently, quietly arrived at by making my own decisions about my own life, when I understood that no one else was making them for me. Mom, I said, I removed my name from everything over the past 2 years. Every joint account. Every document. I'm not connected to any of it. Silence. Why? She said. Her voice was very quiet. Because I wasn't in the estate plan, I said. Because I needed to build my own security when I understood that the family's financial structure didn't include me. The silence after that was the longest of my life. And in it, I could feel my mother understanding, not just the financial reality, but the other reality. The one that had been building since the first Sunday call that ran short. The 41 photos. The toast at Thanksgiving. The pause before she answered my question. I replaced you, she said. Not a question. A statement. The statement of a woman arriving at a truth she had been traveling away from for years. Yes, I said. I told myself you were fine, she said. That you didn't need me the same way she did. I know, I said. I was wrong, she said. 3 words. Simple, plain, not decorated with explanation or qualification. I was wrong. They landed in me the way rain lands after a long drought, not fixing everything, but real. The realest thing she had said to me in 4 years. I know, I said again. And then, I love you, Mom. I'm not going to disappear. But I can't help with the house. I built my own ground because I had to. That was the decision I was left with. She cried then. Quietly, the way she always cried, like she was trying not to let it happen, but it was happening anyway. And I sat on my end of the line, and I let her because sometimes love is just staying on the line while someone understands something they should have understood sooner. The house sold in June. Gerald's company restructured and survived in a reduced form. He was a man who knew how to work, and working was what he had. Russ Crane moved on to his next chapter with a specific untouchability of men who are very careful about where they put their name. My mother and Gerald moved into an apartment that was decent and smaller and nothing like where they had been. Kayla came home for the summer and helped them move. I watched this happen from a distance. I was not invited to help, and I think everyone understood why. But Kayla called me separately a week after the move. She said she wanted to understand what had happened. Not the business side, the family side. She said, "My mom talks about you differently than she talks about me. She talks about you like you're the part of her life she's proudest of. I thought you should know that." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. It was complicated to receive. It still is. My mother and I speak weekly now. The calls are longer than they've been in years, and more honest than they've ever been. She has said things to me in the past 8 months that I didn't know I needed to hear, specific, clear, undecorated things about what she did, and why she told herself it was acceptable, and when she understood it wasn't. She has not asked me to minimize what happened or accept less than the full accounting. She has given me the full accounting. Whether that is enough, whether years of quiet erasure can be addressed by months of honest conversation, is something I am still deciding. I think that's fair. I think some things deserve to be decided slowly. What I know is this. I am 34 years old with a financial life I built for myself, on ground I prepared when I understood that no one else was preparing it. I have a career I am proud of and an apartment that is mine and savings that exist because I took my own security seriously before anyone else did. I am my mother's daughter in the specific way that she taught me, thorough, careful, willing to do the work even when no one is watching. She didn't mean to teach me to protect myself from her, but she taught me everything I needed to know to do it. And here is what I want to say to you. If you are the one sitting at a table where someone else is being toasted, if you are the one being quietly filed under fine, doesn't need much, has her own life. If you are the one watching your place in a family get restructured around someone else's needs while yours go unasked about, you are not required to perform gratitude for being erased. You are not required to wait for an invitation back to a table that moved without you. You are required to build your ground. Quietly.
Carefully.
With the full attention and thoroughness that your family gave to everything except you. The people who forgot to include you in the plan will, eventually, need the plan to hold. Make sure you're not the one inside it when it doesn't. My mother raised me to show up for the people I love, completely and without reservation, even when it costs something. She forgot that I was one of those people. I didn't forget what she taught me. I just turned it toward myself when she stopped turning it toward me. That is not revenge. That is survival. And some days, on the other side of all of it, it feels like the same thing.